So, Sam, thank you very much for joining me for the preview for the new NFL season, which is literally a couple of weeks away. It feels like only yesterday we were dissecting the Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely. It comes around quick. I mean, it's a short burst, isn't it? The NFL season from September to February. It feels like the off season takes forever, but yeah, it'll be upon us before you know it. And it's been a crazy off season as well.
We're actually going to get to that in a few minutes, actually. But I just want to reflect on last season first, because last season, first season back to normality, crowds back, COVID restrictions being relaxed, and that. I just want to get your opinion on it, because I felt like each week was really unpredictable. No one knew what was going to happen. Did you see that same way?
Yeah, absolutely. Very enjoyable season again. I think the move to a 17-game season seemed to work as well. I know there was a lot of kind of a difference of opinion in some quarters about whether or not the move from 16 to 17 games would be a good thing. I mean, great for us as fans, really. You know, it's another week of football. Why wouldn't we enjoy it? But players, obviously, the wear and tear, their workload, etc. But seems to be a positive. I don't think it had a bearing on the season as regards. I don't think the quality of it deteriorated as we went through the season. Exciting and unpredictable as it often is, and it was a really, really good postseason as well last season. I mean, one of the most enjoyable playoff campaigns I can remember for many a year. So I liked the move to 17. I thought it was another interesting year of NFL football.
Yeah, definitely. And then obviously the playoffs were just amazing. So many great games, great moments. And then obviously the Super Bowl itself, the Rams against the Bengals. The Rams, you could say they were on their kind of last chance saloon with the way McVay traded so many draft picks for big plays. And you felt like if we didn't win it this year or next year, when would they win it? And they finally got it. But would you see that the same? Like the Rams only had a couple more chances left?
Yeah, absolutely. But to be honest, I don't really mind the strategy. I mean, a lot of people talk about the win now strategy as almost as if it's a bit of a negative. But if you go and win the thing, then it works out perfectly. Obviously, you know, spent big money on a couple of acquisitions. They already had a star-studded team, and you go and add Von Miller to the defense. You go and add a player like Odell Beckham, who was a real key cog during the playoff run. I know he went down with an injury in the Super Bowl, but took a bit of the emphasis off Cooper Kupp, really helped Kupp flourish. Not that he needed any help, but it's just another key piece to have in. And, you know, I think the whole win now strategy is to be commended, actually. You know, all the chips on the table. Let's try and win the thing. You know, this is the Super Bowl. It's what every team are aiming for. And I also thought last season was great to see the Bengals get there as well. Another real good example of how quick things can turn around in the NFL, the way the draft system works, etc. You're only ever a few years away from being a basket case to becoming a Super Bowl contender. You know, the run that they went on last season, the likes of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, you know, real good stories for the draft system, the way it works. I mean, if we were sitting here, you know, 4 or 5 years ago and you tell me that the Bengals would get to a Super Bowl and come very close to winning it, it will be inconceivable. But again, it's just another real positive for the NFL, the way the draft works, the way the college system is set up there, that so many teams can go from, you know, zero to hero in a few years with the right picks, the right acquisitions, and, you know, a couple of kind of different strategies, really. The Rams, you know, they went out, spent big money, got the big players in. It was rookies and younger players that got the Bengals there, but just another real good advertisement for how well that system can work.
And obviously for him, Joe Burrow, his rookie season was blighted by the horrible ACL injury. So for him to come back, lead his team to Super Bowl, and I said almost win it, was unbelievable. And obviously Matt Stafford bringing up the biggest drive in his life to actually win it for the Rams on that final drive.
Yeah, I mean, incredible final drive. I'm a Lions fan myself, so I was really, really pleased with Stafford. I've spent many a year watching him toil in very, very bad teams in Detroit. And it's easy to say now, I was a big believer going into last season that he was going to be the missing piece. They were a real good quarterback away from being the real deal. I mean, the defense was there, obviously, Aaron Donald, you know, Cooper Kupp. I mean, nobody probably could have predicted the season that he had last year, but they had a real good receiving core going in. They were just missing that quarterback, which is easier said than done. You know, they don't grow on trees, great quarterbacks. But Jared Goff was the only thing I think holding them back the season before they went out and got a good quarterback. And I was thrilled for Matt Stafford, and the connection between him and Kupp last season was was fantastic. I gather that they did a lot of work, those two together. They were the first two people in the facility every morning. They'd have, an hour or two meeting practice between the two of them. And that synergy worked really well. And I was, thrilled for Stafford to go and win a Super Bowl.
Now, obviously, this season, the NFL's back in the UK as it was a couple of seasons ago. Now COVID's lifted. And I just want to ask you about the rise of NFL in the UK, because I feel like in the past few seasons, it's just gone from strength to strength. More people getting involved, more people from the UK really starting to like the NFL. Do you see that the same way? Like more people actually wanting to get into the NFL, wanting to watch the NFL, support a team?
I do, yeah. I think it's probably gone from a few years ago being almost a bit of a niche sport in the UK. There weren't too many NFL fans around. Now I think it's really kind of permeated the zeitgeist for just general sports fans. I know people who wouldn't have considered watching the NFL a few years ago, found it too difficult, etc. But they'll watch something like Red Zone on a weekend, and it's very well placed, I think, week to week with where it is in the week's calendar. The Premier League football's all finished. The Super Sunday games are done. It isn't on in the middle of the night like some Super Bowls are. Obviously, that 6 o'clock window, I think, really, really helps. And having the games here, obviously being able to actually go to the games makes a huge difference as well. And we see, tickets sell out for that so very quickly. I think hats off to people like Shad Khan as well, who's done really well to position the Jacksonville Jaguars franchise where he has. I mean, they must be the best supported team in the UK now, because people can go and watch them every year. Years ago, the best supported teams here, it felt like it was teams like the Niners, the Dolphins, who were historically quite successful during the 90s when we first had NFL on TV here. But the rise of the Jags over the last few years, the fact that they play here every year, I mean, I think it's done that franchise the world of good. I get why players might not relish the trip to London every single year, but in terms of a brand growth, I think Shad Khan's done a real good job. And it's going to be great to see the Packers here this year as well. I think they're the last franchise to play here. They're well supported in the States, but they've got a good international following. Great for the fans to see a player of the caliber of Aaron Rodgers as well. So to complete the set this year will be nice.
And I think my favourite part will be seeing the big cheese heads at Wembley.
Yeah.
But
yeah, absolutely.
About that as well, a couple of people listen, that the chances of an NFL franchise coming from London, because you mentioned about players maybe not relishing the trip to London every year. Do you think that could stop an NFL franchise in London, or do you think there's actually cause or want for it, an NFL franchise coming from London playing in the NFL?
It seems less likely now than it did a few years ago. There seemed to be a lot more talk of it a few years ago. Personally, it wouldn't be for me. I think a lot of the charm of the NFL and a lot of sports really is, they're all, teams from America. You get the rivalries developing and stuff there. Much like I wouldn't want, a Real Madrid or a Barcelona or a new Spanish team to join the Premier League. I like the fact that, it's all based in the US, that all the teams are, from the same country, etc. It wouldn't personally be for me. And I feel like there's less call for it now than there was a few years ago. And as I say, I think the Jags have become the adopted team here anyway. And would NFL fans in this country pivot from the team that they have followed to follow a new London team? I'm not sure I would. I'm not sure I would start supporting the new startup franchise where you've already built an affiliation with the team that you follow and they're an existing team. I just can't imagine it would get the traction that it would need with fans in this country, because I don't think they desert the teams that they support.
But then, did you feel like then there'll have to be an extra week 18 because of obviously the travel and an extra bye? Did you feel like that could play a part as well in the scheduling of it? Because obviously teams are going to have to go over to London, and then the teams going to have to travel from London to US. It's all logistical issues, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it is. And the fact that at the moment, the teams who play the London game, they're always on a bye after that, which, suggests that the traveling does take quite a bit out of you. How it would work with teams, I mean, maybe you slot every team's bye week in after they play a road game here, for example. But yeah, I think it would take a huge toll. I mean, the logistical operation that is the NFL, with all the players and all the many staff members they have there, I wouldn't like to try and plan it. I wouldn't like to try and plan the schedules or be in charge of logistics for a team and try and sort that out on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, it's very tough. And before we get on to the off-season, which we both agree has been probably one of the craziest off-seasons I think I can remember, I just want to ask you about the concussion protocol, because I feel like that can be a hot debate sometimes, because I know other sports, especially now football and cricket, have brought in the concussion protocol, but I feel obviously the NFL's been around for as long as I can remember. But sometimes I feel like when I'm watching, I question some of the decisions when a player takes a hard hit, and only after a couple of plays, obviously they have the concussion, people on the sidelines get them through the test. But sometimes I feel like they don't do enough thorough tests. Do you disagree? Are you at a different opinion on that?
I'm probably a bit more forgiving of the concussion protocol than a lot of people are. It comes in for a lot of criticism, and it has done for a while. And we can all point to plenty of examples where, I think, was it Jacoby Brissett a couple of years ago, and he was like clutching his head, but he was still on for every play, and nobody brought him out of the game. But I think as far as concussion protocols go, in terms of the wider sporting scene, the NFL sets the standard. It's the gold standard. I mean, you could argue that, yes, the concussion protocols have been around longer in the NFL, so they should be up to speed. It's a much more impactful sport than a lot of other sports are. Players take more hits, concussions are way more likely. But you look at, and I know it's in its infancy, but you look at the Premier League and the concussion subs rule, and they really haven't got it nailed down as of yet. And I think the NFL does a much better job than other sports do with concussion protocol. That should be used as the gold standard. I mean, again, I go back to logistics. They have people on the sidelines whose sole job is to spot potential examples of concussion. And when that doesn't work, it's obviously frustrating when you think you've got a spotter there on the sideline whose sole job is to look for concussion, and a player's holding his head and he's still out there and that hasn't been picked up. But the fact that they have personnel in place purely to look for things like that is huge. And for me, it's the best concussion protocol in the sporting world. And I think other jurisdictions, other sports will do well to try and not match the NFL, but learn from the NFL, learn from where mistakes have been made as well. It isn't perfect, and I understand that, but I think it's better than where it was, and I still think it sets the standard worldwide.
And then obviously the quarterback situation as well, because this might sound stupid and it may be just me, but I feel like sometimes on a game day, obviously we all know teams have got to make certain amount of players inactive. But I'm seeing loads of teams have a quarterback on their inactive players, but I feel like that's kind of stupid, because your first choice quarterback gets injured. Obviously, you've got your backup, but then if your backup gets injured, you go to an emergency quarterback, a wide receiver, a running back. So do you feel like teams that put a quarterback on inactive on a game day sometimes can be a disadvantage if worse comes to worse? But I thought that's what you have quarterbacks for, to have replacements, or do you not see it that way?
Well, I mean, as you allude to, it's the most important position on the pitch. We know that. I mean, why wouldn't you have specialist quarterbacks, contingency plans, etc.? But I guess a lot of it comes down to the playbook, the way the coach wants to go. You've only got a certain number of players that you can have active on any given game day. Do they want more players, for special teams defense so they can run certain plays? Or do you want a quarterback that they clearly feel that they don't need to have two backups? Will it bite some teams in the backside? Sometimes, yes. But I guess in a game that's so dominated by numbers, they'll have run the analytics. We hear analytics talk all the time. They probably feel that the chances of both your two quarterbacks going down are small enough that you can take the risk. And I mean, some wide receivers have got a hell of an arm. I mentioned Odell earlier on. I mean, he, when they run those trick plays with him, I mean, he slots in perfectly. Obviously, we saw the COVID situation with, was it Denver a few years ago, where the whole quarterback room went down with COVID, and they had to. I mean, even the first choice, they had like the fifth string wide receiver came in and had to do a serviceable job for the whole game. So they probably feel that the risk isn't so great that they lose their first two QBs, and if they did, they feel they've got somebody with an arm who can step in. But I've got to guess that it comes down to analytics, like so much of the sport does.
And you mentioned Odell Beckham actually reminds me of Julio Jones, who I think almost like one misplaced pass, or maybe even a PSS record when he's threw a ball. So it just shows how players can be quite flexible. But now going back onto the off season, which we've both mentioned a couple of times about how crazy it's been. Because I don't think I can remember an off season like this, because we've had Brady retiring, then not retiring, and then we've had Roethlisberger retiring, Kenny Pickett coming, the number one quarterback for the Steelers probably. We've had Baker Mayfield going from the Browns to the Panthers. How have you seen this off season? Because I've struggled to keep up with how crazy it's been.
Yeah, same. Before we came on the call, actually, I had to just Google off-season recap because I thought there's definitely something I'll have missed in there. And probably week one of the season, I'll put the TV on and I'll think, oh, I don't remember when he went to that team. There's bound to be something that we've missed. Big key thing for me is wide receivers have been getting paid this off-season. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers committing to Green Bay, many people thought that would be enough to keep Devontae Adams there. He went to the Raiders, and that kind of has triggered a bit of a domino effect, as it often does. Other wide receivers in the league seeing how much money he's getting. Tyreek Hill moving from the Chiefs to the Dolphins, basically because the Chiefs were kind of priced out of a deal for Tyreek Hill because Devontae Adams had earned X by going to the Raiders. So receivers have been getting paid during the off-season. There's been a couple of rule changes as well, one of which I'm massively in favour of. The new overtime rules for the playoffs will guarantee that both teams get a possession, because obviously that Chiefs-Bills game last season in the playoffs, hugely enjoyable, fantastic game. And to have it end without Josh Allen ever getting the ball in his hands, to have it kind of decided by a coin flip was pretty rubbish. But, I think they should be commended for the rule changes. Sometimes the NFL and sports in general, they don't make the changes quick enough. They saw that it was a problem last year. That was unsatisfactory. This is the entertainment industry. And at the end of the day, why wouldn't you want to make it more entertaining? And just think how great that wonderful game would have been if Josh Allen had a chance to try and lead the Bills down the field and get a touchdown to keep it going. So that's a rule change they've brought in that's been real positive, just away from kind of player deals and stuff that have come in the off season. But yeah, wide receivers have been getting their money.
And it's interesting. Is this a kind of a hard one to talk about? Because obviously, I mentioned Baker Mayfield going from the Browns to the Panthers, and then that paves the way for Deshaun Watson to go from the Texans to the Browns. But obviously, in the past few months, basically, we've had all this talk about Deshaun Watson and the case, and we now know he's got an 11-game ban and been fined. I forgot how much, and then he's obviously going to return against the Texans in week 12. But do you feel like that's put a dampener on the offseason? The big hoo-ha of like the last couple of weeks with him getting banned for 6 games, then the appeal, and then banned for 11 games. And I spoke to Neil Reynolds, and he said he personally doesn't want to see Deshaun Watson play in the NFL again. And I understand where he's come from because of what the allegations are, but what's your opinion on the whole Deshaun Watson case and how it's been handled? Because it's been quite hard sometimes to listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to disagree with a great like Neil Reynolds. I'd be firmly in the same camp. It is a cloud that's been hanging over the off season. It feels like every single year there is something like this in the NFL. There's obviously a lot of unsavory characters, really. Let's have it right. I mean, I didn't like Kareem Hunt coming back, after what he did. A ban is it doesn't fit the crime, the punishment for me. I think people who are found guilty of, crimes, they should probably be treated like a felon. They shouldn't get away with it because they're athletes, because they play the NFL. And I think it would be better for the sport. I think it would look better for the sport if they were not so much made an example of, but if they were ostracized. But the problem we've got year in, year out is if you've got a certain level of talent, you will be forgiven, because there will be a team out there who are happy to pay for your services. I know, I'm not, obviously the case against Deshaun Watson seems, in my mind, without being, privy to all the ins and outs, it seems pretty cut and dry. But if you're good at a sport, it's not just NFL, any sport, if you're good enough, somebody will probably pay you to do it. And that's a sad fact. But, I wish it wasn't that way. There are a lot of players, not just Deshaun Watson, not just Kareem Hunt, who probably shouldn't be earning a living playing this. But what are you going to do when money's involved?
Yeah, money is a big factor. And how do the Browns go from here? Because obviously, look like Jacoby Brissett, former third choice quarterback for the Patriots, will be number one quarterback. And you feel like our Browns and myself, so I've had a bit of disappointment over the last few seasons. So do you feel like the Browns are basically going to be in damage limitation till week 12, till Watson comes back? Or do you feel like the step can maybe get them off to a decent start?
I think it will be about staying in touch for the Browns. I mean, 11 games is such a big chunk of the season. I think that they will just hope, they will be pretty happy if they're still in the properly in the postseason picture come week 12. I mean, they'd have to have a pretty disastrous season to be eliminated by week 12, obviously, but I think they'll just be content with being within striking distance by the time week 12 rolls around. But it's a tough division. Obviously you've got the Bengals in there, made last season's Super Bowl. The Ravens are probably going to be favourites for that division under Lamar Jackson. Not quite sure what the Steelers are going to be like this season, but it's a good division. There's going to be that many divisional games that will have gone before week 12. So it'll be about staying in touch, because 11 weeks to be without your franchise quarterback, the first choice quarterback, is a massive chunk of the season. So if they can hang around, if they can have a respectable record going into week 12, I think they'd be pretty happy with that, and then hope that Watson is going to be the man to take them over the line in the back end of the season. So that needs to be in striking distance, I think.
And it'll be interesting to see the reaction to Sean Watson gets from Houston in week 12, but that's a long time away now. But looking ahead to this season, which is obviously only a couple of weeks away before the opening game, the Rams kick off the season. And what are your predictions for the season? Do you feel it could be like the same as last season? Do you feel like there'll be certain teams who will dominate? How do you see it playing out? Because as always, there's hope for every team that they could finally win it. But I want to hear your opinion on how you think it'll play out.
Yeah, well, obviously, if the last two seasons are anything to go by, everyone should get on the Cardinals, really, who host the Super Bowl this year. We've had 2 back-to-back home Super Bowl winners, having never had it before. Although I don't think that will happen again. I've got to admit, I'm pretty sweet on the Broncos this year. I see a lot of parallels to them as I did the Rams last season. I thought they are a team that are an elite quarterback away from being genuine contenders. I mean, the defense has always been good in Denver. It's something the franchise has kind of been built on. It was a big factor when they won the Super Bowl a few years ago. They've got a nice 1-2 punch in the backfield now with Williams and Gordon. And I think more and more we're seeing running backs go that way for teams. I think we're getting further away from the traditional bell cow. Maybe Derrick Henry would be the exception for the Titans, who takes a lot of the work. But I think they're trying to look after running backs now, trying to make them a little bit more durable. So I think it's important to have 2 good running backs who you can interchange with. They've got that. The receiving core is really good. And now they've added a player of Russell Wilson's quality at quarterback. I think he could be the missing piece for Denver, just like Matt Stafford was the missing piece for the Rams last season. The problem they've got is they're in the hottest division in football. I mean, the AFC West looks absolutely stacked this year. You've got the Chiefs, obviously. They're going to be a factor. We know that under Mahomes. Obviously, I mentioned I like the Broncos. The Raiders have added well in the offseason. I'm pretty sweet on the Chargers this year. Justin Herbert's really emerged as a real stud. They've got weapons that he can feed. So the difficulty for the Broncos will be trying to get out that division. I mean, winning that division is going to take some doing this year. But if their division wasn't so hot, I think they'd probably be a little bit shorter in the betting. So the Broncos would be my idea of a sporting wager on the Super Bowl winner, if you like. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Dolphins have a good season. They're quite risky, but the speed they've got in the receiving core is frightening. I mean, you had Waddle there anyway, who's a real speedster. You add Tyreek Hill, probably one of the fastest players in the game. It'll be a big season for Tua Tagovailoa, because if he can't find those two with the routes that they run in the backfield, the speed that they possess, then serious question marks are going to be asked about him. But if he rises to the challenge, I could see the Dolphins surprising a few people. And let's not forget, Tua was a real stud in college before the injury. I know that year's draft, Joe Burrow ended up going first. He had the incredible run with LSU, and he's a conference winning quarterback now. But before Tua Tagovailoa's injury, he was considered the consensus number 1 pick. He's a lefty, which can be a little difficult for defenses to play against. So there's a lot of risk with the Dolphins, but I wouldn't be surprised if they have a sneaky good season if all the pieces click into place. They've got a little bit of a cloud hanging over them as well with the Brian Flores lawsuit. But yeah, they could be dark horses or a sleeper team, if you like. Not saying they could go all the way, but I like the Dolphins to do a little better than people think, but I could end up looking very foolish as well, because it could equally be a dreadful season for them. This is the Dolphins after all.
this is Dolphins. There's been so many predictions flying around from people who have spoke to, but I think both have mentioned maybe the Bills as well. They could be a decent team this year. Obviously, Josh Allen, and you said you felt like in Madden Josh Allen last season had the chance to answer Mahomes, and I think how do you think they're going to do this season if Allen can just keep up what he's been doing?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the Bills have to be considered serious contenders. As we mentioned earlier on, they were very unfortunate to get beat in that game. It was a bit of a farce of but you know, that's the way the rules were. If that coin flip goes the other way, who knows what could have happened? You know, they could have won the whole thing. Stephon Diggs is one of those receivers who's got paid in the offseason. He hasn't moved anywhere, but the Bills have given him a new deal. You know, they've added an all-time great defensive player like Von Miller, who's already got a couple of rings. He'll be hungry for more. There's nothing not to like about the Bills. So they're for sure bona fide candidates again.
And now, final question. I've asked this of Will and of Neil. Your predictions for the Super Bowl and who you think might win it. Obviously, it's very early in the season, so this could look absolutely stupid come February, March next year. But do you have a early, like before the season, prediction of who you think is going to be in the Super Bowl?
Well, yeah, I like the Broncos. I'm invested financially in the Broncos, so I hope that they get there and I hope they win it. And from the NFC, you've got to be looking at teams like the Bucs and the Rams again. You know, obviously the Rams looking for back-to-back. I'll maybe say that the Bucs get there as well. You know, I don't think Tom Brady would have reversed the decision to retire unless he had a good feeling that they could contend once more. You know, he's not coming back for his 23rd season to do anything other than try and win another Super Bowl. So, yeah, I'll take the Broncos out of the AFC and the Bucs out of the NFC, and I'll take the Broncos to win it all.
Ooh, that's a good pick. And actually, final question, and it's a little trivia question, because this season we have a chance to see the all-time record for wins being swapped over. Do you know the two teams that are in contention for that?
I have no idea. I'm guessing two teams who've been successful historically.
Yes, it is the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers.
You know, I was gonna say Packers. I would not have found the Bears, but I suppose they're, you know, one of the oldest franchises, etc.
Yep.
But yeah, that is interesting.
Looking on my screen here, the Bears have played 1,435, won 783, lost 610, and the Packers have played 1,401 and won 782. So, do you think that could actually change the season where the Packers become the team with the most wins since 1920?
Every chance, yeah. I mean, I think they're objectively a better team than the Bears, so I think yeah, there's every chance that happens. No wonder I've never had any joy from my Lions with those two in our division.
That's actually true, but you never know. Things might change this season. Well, Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today, and let's hope for another great NFL season.
Fingers crossed. Thanks for having me on, Michael.